Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the deeply fascinating and honestly incredibly ironic history behind one of literature's absolute greatest masterpieces and the massive modern adaptation it inspired. We're going to explore this wild intersection of a deeply personal tragic biography, an earth-shattering historical revolution, and a modern-day streaming blockbuster. It's a story all about wealth, ruin, and a really profound realization about human nature. So let's just dive right in. We're starting off with this iconic paradox spoken by the character Tancredi Falconeri. If we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. This single, brilliant line, it's basically the thematic heartbeat of our entire journey today. I want you to keep this paradox right in the back of your mind because as you'll see, it perfectly echoes through the author's own life, the historical backdrop of the story, and even the very structure of the book itself.
Part 1. The Modern Netflix Phenomenon.
To really understand the legacy we're dealing with, you have to look at this incredibly lavish, big-budget Netflix production that brought the 1958 novel to life. Released in March 2025, this adaptation was an absolute mammoth of a project. We are talking a €40 million budget here. They filmed across these breathtaking locations in Sicily and Turin over 105 days. They brought in 5,000 extras, 130 historic carriages, and get this, 100 animals managed by 12 different trainers. It is just a sumptuous, sprawling period drama in every sense of the word. But the stark, bitter irony of all this is that on one hand, we have this massive, multi-million euro cultural phenomenon making headlines globally. Yet, the story itself was written by an impoverished Sicilian nobleman who lived a life of almost total obscurity. The incredible glitz and glamour of this modern streaming mega hit stands in direct, almost painful contrast to the extremely quiet, introverted reality of the man who actually dreamed the whole thing up. Which brings us to Section 2, The Monster Who Waited. Let's talk about that author, Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. His tragic timeline perfectly illustrates a man whose entire life was essentially defined by waiting. He was incredibly shy, spending most of his adult life doing, frankly, very little, just visiting bookshops, eating cakes, and waiting around. Finally, in 1954, he sits down to write The Leopard. By 56, he submits it to a major publisher, Mondadori, and they reject it. He finishes a second draft, sends it to Einaudi in 57. Well, that April, he's diagnosed with lung cancer. And then, just days before he dies in July 1957, Einaudi rejects his life's work too. It wasn't until November 1958, over a year after his death, that The Leopard was finally published by Feltrinelli to immediate, explosive world fame. The man achieved global immortality, but he never lived to see a single day of it. But, beyond all that tragedy, Lampedusa was a brilliantly eccentric character. His cousins in this exclusive aristocratic club literally nicknamed him the Monster, simply because he had a monstrous habit of always having his nose buried in a book. He was also a massive Anglophile. He actually considered Britain his ideal country and famously obsessed over what he called the lordly cheeses of England: Rosy Chester, Green Stilton, Amber Cheddar. He was so intensely shy that he felt way more comfortable hanging out with his large pack of rescued dogs, and he'd speak to each of them in a different language. His absolute favorite was this dog named Crab. And Crab didn't just get table scraps, no way. For the dog's birthday, Lampedusa hosted a literal dinner party for him, featuring pâté, peas, meat, and honey, which was then followed by an hour of supervised cat chasing. Moving on to Section 3, A Paradox of Change. The absolute brilliance of this novel lies in how it contrasts two completely opposing forces. On one side, you have the fiery, revolutionary push of General Garibaldi's red shirts invading Sicily, which represents the rising, wealthy, highly dynamic bourgeoisie. And on the flip side, you have the world of our protagonist, Prince Fabrizio Cellina, representing this slow, exhausted, static noble class that is trying desperately to figure out how to survive a political landscape that is literally shifting beneath their feet. And this is exactly where that opening paradox hits the nail on the head. Prince Fabrizio realizes that resisting this revolution is completely pointless. So what's his move? He tacitly endorses the new unified government. He even orchestrates the marriage of his favorite penniless nephew to the daughter of a wealthy, non-aristocratic, middle-class mayor. Now, Fabrizio doesn't do this out of some sudden burst of progressive political idealism. Not even close. It's a highly calculated survival strategy. He accepts new money and new politics purely to keep his family's traditional status and comfortable way of life completely intact. He participates in change precisely to avoid being changed.
Section 4. The Hidden Ring Structure.
Now, if you look at early critics, they actually thought the book lacked a plot. They complained about superfluous scenes, but they completely missed Lampedusa's genius here. He used what's known as a chiastic structure. Instead of a straightforward, linear story moving from point A to point B, he engineered the book like a giant mirror. He intentionally paired opposite moods, matching moments of deep bitterness on one side of the book with moments of serenity on the other. It creates this endless loop of emotions rather than a forward-moving plot. So you've got to wonder, why on earth would an author deliberately avoid a straightforward timeline when writing a grand historical epic about a revolution? Why make the plot feel so strangely static? Well, actually, the structure itself is the message. By avoiding any real forward momentum in the plot, Lampedusa brilliantly forces us, the readers, to experience the paralyzed, unchanging reality of the Sicilian nobles. You're trapped in their sequence of moods. Even while a literal war is raging outside, the prince would rather just hunt, eat a lavish dinner, and study the unchanging stars. The static architecture of the novel perfectly mirrors the stubborn immobility of the social class it's describing. It's absolutely brilliant. Finally, Section 5, The Leopard's Enduring Legacy. Let's look at this deeply powerful realization by Prince Fabrizio. As he watches the bourgeoisie replace the old nobility, he notes, "Immortality has been explicitly promised a holy church. To us, as a social class, it has not." He sees that while the surface world seems incredibly mobile and revolutionary, the fundamental social hierarchy isn't actually disappearing at all. It's just reshuffling its players. The names at the top change, sure, but the steep inequality remains exactly the same. The aristocracy isn't immortal, but the structure of power itself, that seems to be. And wow, does that cynical, piercing observation still strike a nerve today? To put that into perspective, within just 5 days of its release in March 2025, the Netflix adaptation garnered over 3 million views globally. It shot right into the top 10 in over 30 countries. This tale of a man desperately navigating massive social upheaval and wealth transfers feels incredibly relevant to us right now. It proves for sure that Lampedusa's quiet observations on power, survival, and the illusion of change are entirely timeless. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up this explainer. We've seen how a shy, dog-loving Sicilian aristocrat turned his own family's decline into a literary masterpiece, sparking a $40 million modern spectacle. But that core message remains. Look at the power structures around us today, in tech, in politics, in modern society as a whole. Ask yourself, is everything around us frantically changing just so everything can stay exactly the same? Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the world around you.